welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist, and today we are going to be filling my new Art Toolkit palette. So gouache is my comfort paint, it's my comfort medium, but I've been on a bit of a watercolour journey. I have been in two minds whether to fill this little palette with gouache or with watercolour, but I have decided to go with gouache because I'm going to be filling a bigger palette with my watercolours. The idea behind this one is I want to use this for plein air work. So over on Patreon, it's woodland themed this month, so I really want to be able to have something really lightweight to take with me. The Art Toolkit palette, I've seen lots of things about Art Toolkit, and I'm really excited to give it a go myself. This was gifted to me by Art Toolkit, and they do have a discount code, so I will leave all the information on screen, but if you use the code KTM10, then you'll get 10% discount, and this is expiring at the end of April, so you only have a few more weeks to use it, but I'm really excited to give it a go, so a big thank you to them. So the Art Toolkit palette that I chose is the Pocket Palette. I have seen lots of great things about these palettes, as I said. This one is slightly smaller, which means I will have to be a little bit more choosy with which colours I want to take with me. But that's a good thing because I'm definitely an overpacker, and I want to be able to have a really lightweight set or lightweight pack to take with me when I do paint outside, especially in the spring and summer months. So that's going to play a big part in this. I'll do some swatching and we'll fill it together, but let me show you what this palette looks like. So you can see the size here. This does feel like a business card holder. It's very, very lightweight and very slimline. Because they are magnetic, you can see that we've got the different pans in here and these all slot inside. There's some really small little square ones, there's some larger ones here and some longer ones as well. This one over here is for mixing, and there's also a mixing space up here. There's a lip on either side but not here, so I guess I'll have to be a little bit careful it doesn't run off. It's a little bit smaller than I'm used to in terms of mixing space, so we'll see how we go. I do feel like these are going to be a little bit too small for me. I think it will be helpful for a couple of colours, but I don't think I need 8. So what I've done is bought some more standard pans, and I bought these from Rosemary & Co, which are based here in Yorkshire in the UK, so it was cheaper shipping, and I highly recommend them. They were great. They also do brushes and things, which I mentioned in last week's haul, which I'll leave linked. So I bought some more of these. So there are 8 of these. You can see the size here. So these are the longer ones. These are their standard pans. So I think I will swap out maybe 6 of these. I'll see how we go, but I think 6 because this just feels like a better size for me. I generally use size 10 or 12 brushes, and this feels a little bit small. So, I mean, this is all adaptable, which is what I love about this palette. If I change my mind on something, I can just take them out. It's easy as anything just to customize this. So if I do change my mind, I can just swap it in. So it's really, really helpful that it is customizable, and that helps me because I always want to make the right choice and I hate the idea of getting it wrong. But you can't really get it wrong with this because if you decide something's not working, you can just change it out. So I love that. I love how magnetic it is. I did go for the silver colour. You can get this in different colours, and there are also different sizes. So there's the demi palette, I think that's a tiny one. There's also the folio palette, which is bigger. But as I said, I do want to try and test my lightweight packing skills and have something really small and compact to take with me on location, which is why I went for this pocket palette. So I have read the blog post on the Art Toolkit website about prepping it. Really, really helpful. Lots of information over on their blog. And I'm going to first start by, says it on the card here, conditioning the magnet with a light coat of vegetable oil, and then I'll fill my pans with tube paints. I'll just do the vegetable oil now, and then we can decide on colours, which is going to be difficult, but we're in this together and I'll show you what I've decided to go with. Okay, so I'm conditioning it just with a little bit of vegetable oil, and that helps to protect the rubber, and also it's supposed to help with the longevity of this palette. So now that's done, it's time to fill my pans. So I have got my big crate of gouache here, which you can see. I've picked out a few ones which I'm pretty sure I want to use, but I also know I want to add in a red, probably a tiny bit of red, and also some blue. So I'm just going to grab that out now. I always find it hard to decide on colours because I wasn't sure whether to take like a blue and a yellow and then I'll be able to mix the greens, or whether to take pre-prepared greens. But I think I'm going to do a bit of both. I will have a blue and yellow in there, but I also want to take some greens ready to go. For blues of the sky, I tend to either use sky blue or sometimes ultramarine, which is a really good one, and also an all-rounder, which I can use from other colours. So I might go ultramarine. Portrait pink's always a nice one as well. Let's get these out and then we'll see how many palettes we've got and we can decide the configuration. Okay, I feel like I've already got too many here, but let's have a go. So this is going to take some planning. I've got a sketchbook here as well to be able to write down some notes and also do some swatching. Because I'm thinking about nature, that's definitely going to tie into my palette. So when I am setting up a limited palette, I definitely think about what it is I'm going to be painting. So I'm not doing a limited palette for everything, I'm doing a limited palette for nature, which has really helped me to curate my selection and from my crate down to this already. Now you'll notice I also have this one, which is a watercolour. This is the Buff Titanium by Schminke. Now this was really good in my watercolour palette and it's much more opaque than my other watercolours. So although I've got a lot of gouache here, I might end up putting this in because I think it's a really nice neutral. And as I said, it is opaque, similar to gouache than it is to watercolour in my opinion. I also have this new one, which is from my recent haul, which is Leaf Green. That is a watercolour as well, but I think I won't put that in. If I'm sticking with gouache for most of it, I will use Linden Green. So I think I'll go with the Linden Green. I think I want a big one of that one. Let's do a little bit of a rough setup here before I start making some notes. I definitely want to have the extra mixing palette in there. So that already takes out a little bit of room, but I think it will be really helpful. I do also want to include a white. I think that will be helpful to have. Sometimes I'll use zinc white, but I've just grabbed this permanent white, which is easy to grab in my crate. I feel like white will be useful. I'm just trying to think what I'll use the most. So usually I use oxide of chromium mixed with cadmium yellow, so I definitely want bigger pans of those, but I'm wondering if this will be too big. I'm thinking whether this one should be replaced with some of these standard pans. It doesn't look like much. I am used to having quite a lot to be able to mix it, so that's why these felt too small, but I think that will be handy to have a red in. So I've got a cadmium red deep, so I'm just going to go with one red. I'll swatch that in a minute just to check. And for example, I'm not taking another yellow, so with my watercolour palette I was doing a split primary setup and doing like a cool yellow and a warm yellow, but I'm just going to do the one yellow here because again I can swap it out if I change my mind, but this is like using my go-to colours as it is and knowing what I already use. I might do olive. I really like this olive green, so I might do that in the big one. I might swap this to a big one, but again that takes up a bit more space. If we say that's that and that. Okay, you're really seeing like this real time. I feel like that's going to be too big. We've got burnt umber. What else do I want in the small one? I definitely want blue. Maybe I could do blue. I think blue should be bigger. Naples yellow is a really nice soft neutral. So that would be there. I think I'll get rid of the portrait pink because I can mix a nice sort of soft pink with the red and the Naples yellow. And then I do want some darker tones, so I've got burnt umber, which is a nice brown and really useful for doing like the forest, and again mixing in with my greens. The blue. Do I want a small blue or a big blue? Okay, so that's it for that. So I'm thinking if I take out this big one, and then I can get two more in instead of just one. So that would be the yellow and then one more colour. So if this is green, we can play around with the layout as well. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 colours there. It's just whether I want to swap out any of these, if I want to have oxide of chromium as well as olive green. So olive green is much warmer than the cooler oxide of chromium, which I do think will be handy. So maybe I won't use any big ones at all. But then I haven't allowed for the white either. And I haven't included burnt sienna, which is a little bit warmer. So I wonder if I could make the burnt sienna or something similar with the burnt umber and the red. So let's take that out. I definitely want the burnt umber. Naples yellow. Yellow ochre, again, I think that will be handy. So it's almost like I've got a dark, a mid and a light for like my neutrals and browns. And then I've got a light and then two different temperatures of green here rather than a dark, because I can mix a dark with the brown, a red, a blue, and then I've got that buff titanium, but maybe I won't need it if I'm going to take white Okay, let's see what we've got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 10. I do think that I would like to have this. This is obviously taking up maybe 4 standard pans, but I think it would be helpful for me to mix and keep it all contained rather than take a separate mixing palette. That kind of defeats the point. So let us swatch these out and I will show you close-ups of those. So first up we've got Linden Green, which is a really nice bright yellowy sort of spring green. It definitely leans more yellow. I'm not going to show these mixed together, but you'll see how I mix them later on when I do test them outside. I'm also doing this the day before because I want them to dry in the palettes, and again that is recommended by ArtToolkit to allow them to dry overnight. So that's the Linden Green. Then I'll do the Olive Green. So I kind of just want to double check the colours before I put them into the pans. And I will be putting in some vegetable glycerin into the pans as well, just to try and help them last a little bit longer. I have made a gouache palette before, which you might remember, which is this one here, and you can see that they do crack. And this is well loved. You can still see there's quite a lot there, but you can really see how it's come apart and it started to sort of spill out, so it's not very practical. So I think this little ArtToolkit palette will be much more helpful for on location than this bigger sort of bulkier thing, and I think the gouache will be more contained. So that's Olive Green. Then we have Oxide of Chromium, which is my go-to green, but it is definitely cooler than the olive one. But I think it's helpful to have lots of different variations of greens, and as I said, I could mix this up if I just did a bigger blue, but I think that it will be really helpful on location of having these handy and ready to go. So that's Oxide of Chromium. And then I will do Cadmium Yellow Hue, just because I do mix that in all the time with my Oxide of Chromium usually. That's a really nice yellow. Really nice and warm, very sunshiny, spring-like yellow. So that will be helpful as well if there's little pops of yellow in the forest from like dandelions and things, or like buttercups and flowers like that. So that's Cadmium Yellow Hue. Let's do Naples Yellow so you can see how lovely this colour is. I use this a lot. This gets a lot of use in my work. So it's definitely a warm sort of neutral, but it works really well mixed with white. I also want to make sure that all of these colours go together nicely as well. And then if I do want a pop of colour, I can just add that in with like near colours or pencils rather than the paint. So Naples Yellow. Then we'll do Yellow Ochre. So kind of, this is a very warm palette at the moment. Obviously I've got a slightly cooler Oxide of Chromium, but it's definitely looking quite warm. We'll do Burnt Umber. This one's a bit thicker than the others. There we go, that'll be nice. Again, warm toned brown. And then next to that I'll do the Cadmium Red Deep. I think that's a slightly cooler tone red, but I'm only going to do a small amount of that one. So this is Ultramarine, which I use for the skies. Really nice blue. And again, I can mix this in with the greens in my palette. So this one's Ultramarine, and then white is the last one. My water is quite dirty, so this might pick up some tint, but there we go. Probably won't show up much. This is on ivory tone paper, but it is there. So this feels like a really nice warm spring palette. This will take me obviously into summer, but I also think it could work with autumn, especially because of the red. Generally, I would say I am a fair weather plein air artist, so I don't generally go out in the winter, but I would like to try that this year and do some experimenting. But I feel like my winter palette would be very different for this, whereas this would stretch 3 seasons, I think, as it is. So I think that will be really nice mixed together. So let's just do a quick layout. So we've got, this isn't going to be super accurate in terms of space. So this is mixing space. And then we've got split into half. Okay, some of these are definitely bigger than others. Definitely not accurate, but then we've got it like this. Let's put this into practice. So this one will be white, and clearly mass isn't my strong point because I have 11 spaces because of this 2-1 here. So I think it will be nice to have a cooler neutral. So I will bring back in this buff titanium. I can't remember if I was planning to do that, but I think that will be really nice. So this is cooler, and again I think that will be useful for mixing. It's more like a kind of a mushroom colour to me. But I'm going to put that here, and then this one will be the white. And I feel like I've tried to pair them together. So I've put my greens up here and that yellow, which might get a little bit dirty. I'm kind of tempted to do what I've done with my watercolour palette, where I've got one sort of dirty yellow, one clean yellow, which has been working really well. So I think that will work. It'll be the same colour, but I'll split it into two pans. So one can be for the mixing greens, and one can be for like if I want to mix orange with the red. So I think that makes sense to me. I really like how this is looking. We've got my earth tones down here. It's quite an earthy palette as it is, but some freshness as well with the yellow. So I'm happy with that. I think that will work really, really nicely. It doesn't feel like much is missing. I can mix the purple. I haven't got sort of cool or warm tone colours of everything, but I think this will be really good for my very warm tone nature palette. I do tend to lean warm anyway. So I think that will work really, really well. I'm happy with that. I'm going to fill my pans. So I'm just going to take that one out because now this will be the two little ones. But this feels better than having one sort of square one taking up space. I don't know which one I would cull. I think we'll stick with that. And as I said, I can always change it. I'll do my thoughts afterwards as well as a voiceover, maybe when I'm out and about, to share if I felt like anything was missing. But that feels good to me. I'm happy with that. I feel like, I mean, it's not super limited. There's still 11 colours there, including white, but I think that's good for me. And this is super compact, so it'll be really interesting to see how I use it on location. So let us fill in the palette. So I'm going to put a drop of vegetable glycerin in first, and then put in these colours here, and then we'll be ready to go. So here I am just adding the vegetable glycerin into my standard pans. I wasn't sure how much to use, and the reason I'm doing this is just to stop the gouache drying out because it stops them from crumbling. But you'll see later on that this didn't necessarily work on some of them. I think it does depend on the pigments. But I just started by squeezing the gouache into the pans, and then I mix it in with the vegetable glycerin using a toothpick, and that also helps to spread it out. It is a bit of a messy process, which you'll also see when I show you my dirty hands at the end of this, but it was really, really satisfying. I really enjoyed seeing it fill the pans, and I did find that some of them were easier to do than others, so you can definitely see the difference here where we've got the really lumpy paint, and that was because it came out the tube a lot harder, so it was harder to mix. Here is my dirty fingers after all of that, and then here is my pencil roll. So this is everything that I took with me for my plein air session, which you're going to see in a second. So I did take quite a lot of things. I took my water brushes, which are mostly from Derwent, and I also took a few Tombow brush pens, so not a huge amount, but I did want to have a few of them. Then here in this little zip pouch, I've got my ArtToolkit palette and a sharpener. So this is after the session, so you can see what it looks like at the end of it, and I did find the mixing space to be enough. Here's how the brown fared, so not very well, it's completely crumbled, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how I found it whilst I show you all the footage from me painting outside. If you're wondering where I got my pencil roll, it is handmade, so I just made this myself and made up the pattern, so unfortunately I can't just share a link. Here are all my Neo colours, so they just tuck in at the bottom there, and I did take quite a range of pencils. So here we are in the New Forest. This was one evening where I went with Mitch, who helped me with the camera and things. There's my little tripod and my stool, and I decided this was the view that I wanted to paint. So here's my pencil roll. I did take some kitchen towel, a clip, and my sketchbook. So I used the Hannah Muller watercolour book. I've got a video on this on my channel already, just reviewing it, so I'll leave that linked up in the cards and down below. I really like using a pencil roll because it does fold up quite small, and then I can easily see everything. So rather than taking a pencil case, it feels like it's easier for me and quicker for me to grab and see all the colours I've got instead of rooting through, especially when I am outside, so I'm not just like leaving them all on the floor and maybe missing one. So I did leave the paint to dry for a day. You can see some of them have cracked, but some of them definitely disintegrated a little bit more where they were less runny when they went in. So possibly needed more glycerin, but I think it does depend on the pigments. I know it does seem kind of counterintuitive to take all of those mixed media things and just this tiny palette, so obviously the point of that is to keep it really nice and light, but for me, I am a mixed media artist and I really like to have a lot of supplies with me just to have the choice. So I didn't mind having that, and it also still meant I didn't need to take a really large mixing palette, I didn't have to take tubes of paint and stuff, so it still was quite minimal for me, and I really love that it does fit into my little pencil roll pouch really well. So it worked out great for me, even though I know it kind of defeats the point of going super minimal with the paints, but I really enjoyed using this. So let's talk a little bit more about how I found the process and the ArtToolkit palette to use. So I did use it with my water brushes, which worked out great. I like to have a variety of sizes, and then I swap between them depending on the colours. So I tend to keep one as like the greens, one as the browns, and one as the blues to keep that nice and clean for the art itself. But of course you can still rinse them through, I just prefer to work in this way and have multiple options. So I found the mixing area to be absolutely fine. I kept one slight area for the blues just to mix it up with the white, which you'll see when I add in the sky. But I used the bigger mixing area for the greens, and that worked out really well. It was plenty big enough, and I think it works fine for me as I continuously go back and forth from the palette to remix my colours. So that was actually fine. I didn't feel like I needed more space, so I was surprised with that. And then I really like just having all of the different colours there really easily at hand and being able to see it all as well. Here I am just adding on the sky, so just using the top corner of the palette just to keep that nice and clean. The linden green did crack slightly and so did the olive green, so perhaps I needed a bit more vegetable glycerin, but otherwise the only ones that kind of completely shattered was the brown and the oxide of chromium. I think I can try and reactivate it maybe with some water and mix in some more vegetable glycerin, or I might just swap that out with a watercolour, so maybe squeeze in a tube of watercolour instead. I definitely think brown is useful, but I would like it to be a lot wetter, so perhaps watercolour would be fine in there. I'm not worried about it being both gouache and watercolour, as I said, and because I've got that buff titanium in there, I just think that they work so nicely together, so I'm happy to have both in there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. The place we went was very peaceful. I just found a little place to sit, and there was a car park within walking distance, but it was very lovely, very calm, and just a really nice way to spend the evening. I tried to build up my piece in layers, so obviously I put down the base layer first with my gouache, and I'm adding in a bit more texture because I really wanted it to be very rich and vibrant. I'm also using the pans to mix a little bit, so not just using the colour and then the palette, I'm also mixing within the colours. So I think that's why it's really helpful to have that clean yellow, because I am quite a messy and dirty colourist. But I think it worked out fine, and I do keep the colour families together, so if I'm mixing into the linden green, generally I'm mixing in some other greens and browns, so it still works absolutely fine. So this is my gouache layer done, and then I'm coming in just again to enhance the scene with some mixed media. So I'm adding on top with my brush pens. You do have to be a little bit careful because the gouache can reactivate, but it was absolutely fine with my brush pens, and I don't tend to be super careful. I did want to add more contrast in, so instead of mixing up a darker brown gouache, I did just come in with my dark brown Tombow, and I think that worked really nicely. I was just really trying to capture those trees in the distance and just to try to show that there was quite a full forest back there. So that was really helpful, and then I'm trying to just add in a lot more texture. I'm using a Pentel brush pen here, so I'll try and leave everything down below, but if there's a specific shade that you want to know what I'm using, just pop the timestamp in the comments and I can double check that for you. I find using pencils really helpful to add in the smaller elements rather than relying on the thin water brush to add that in, and then I'm just building up the colours and working on top of what I've already put down with my gouache. I tend to use wet mediums as my base layer, and I'm going to be talking more about that in next week's video when I share my suggestions for mixed media and talk about my sort of layering and ratio that I use when I am creating. So hopefully that will be helpful, but you can kind of see my process where it starts with the wet medium and then the dry on top. So it's almost done here, just adding on a bit of near colours, but I really enjoyed painting plein air, and the ArtToolkit palette was really handy just to be so small and to just be able to have that alongside my other mixed media. As I said, I don't have to worry about 2 paints here, and it's not bulky at all. And if I did want to go super minimalist, I know that I could do. I'm just terrible at packing light, but as I say, it was really helpful to have that all in one place, and I'm definitely going to use it again. I'm even using it at home as well in the studio just because it's so easy to grab, especially when I'm working really fast and wanting to do some quick studies. I really like the idea that it's ready to go, but I do want to be careful that they don't crumble too much. Luckily the seal is really good, so I didn't worry about that coming out. One tip I did get from my lovely patron Carol in our drawing session was to put in a plastic coffee stirrer at the bottom, because some of the pans can slip down because there's a slight little gap between the bottom. So I'm definitely going to do that. I think that would be helpful. So a big thank you to Carol. I know she watches these YouTube videos, a really helpful tip. So I'm just packing up here, rolling it all up, and then I tie it with my ribbon closure, and I will show you the final result. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. A huge thank you for watching. Let me know if you have art toolkit palettes yourself, because I'd love to hear what you filled them with, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Thank you to my patrons for their support, and to you for watching. I will see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later.